I was born in Brooklyn. My dad was in the military, so we lived in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas on military bases, and then came back to Nassau County. We were in the original Levittown, moved to Plainview, and then when I was in third grade, we moved to Bellport, which is in Suffolk County, very rural area on the water, much like Talbot County in Easton. And then eighth grade, we moved to Patchogue, the next town west, and graduated high school there. And then went to college at my dad's alma mater in South Dakota. And so I always told people I was a cultural exchange student. And ended up marrying a girl from Aberdeen, South Dakota, and spent 18 years in South Dakota. I graduated with a teaching degree. I had a history major and a minor in driver's ed, because in those days you always had to have a minor in driver's ed. And then I worked my way into retail. I had worked in retail in high school and college. Became a county assessor in Brown County, and then got recruited to Huron, South Dakota as a city assessor, and spent a total of 6 years in government. A few people came to me and said, I know you're a member of the chamber and you're running the government affairs committee. We think this would be a good job for you. And so I applied, and in February of 1981, I became the president and CEO of the Huron Area Chamber of Commerce and their development corporation. And so that really got me into understanding economic development. And then I was recruited, U.S. Chamber sent my name down to North Platte, Nebraska in 1984. I ended up going there and running the Chamber Development Corporation and Convention and Visitors Bureau, and did that for 10 years. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce always would post a listing of different opportunities. And when I left North Platte, before I left North Platte, I actually went to work for a company that had a $286 million contract tariff with AT&T when they broke up the regional Bell operating companies. And I spent a year with them as the Midwest Regional Sales Manager. We opened up an operation in North Platte with 104 people, and then a second operation, Fremont, Nebraska, with 100 people. And driving back and forth across the state and trying to manage two operations for 1 year was long enough for me. It was I always say that's my HR experience. But once again, it was a great opportunity to learn. And I went to Kansas to manage Chamber of Commerce down there. My wife and I had told the folks there we'd be there 5 years. And we started looking, and the U.S. Chamber had listed the Talbot County Chamber of Commerce as having an opening. And so we put a resume in and got an invitation to come here in December of 1999 and be interviewed, and found out I was one of the two individuals that they invited to the community. I was taken in a car and driven around, and the person who was driving me around was showing me all the waterfront homes. And I said, this is really nice, but I know what you're paying, so to show me where the real people live. Really felt good about the interview, and got a call in January and offered me the opportunity to come here. And so I moved here started March 1st of 2000, and my wife came in April. And we spent our first year in a rented house, and then the next year we were lucky enough to get in one of Hank Corbin's new homes. And from there, we spent about 2.5, 3 years, sold it, bought another house in town, sold that, and then moved in a townhome. And we're at Dixon Square, which is an infill project. We've been there 18 years now. Well, 8 years ago is when I first got elected to the town council. And at that time, had been advocating for the chamber, both with the town council and county council, on a number of issues. And one of the laments that I heard was there really aren't very many people on either board that had business experience. And so I talked with my board of directors and said I would like to run for office, and living in the first ward, that would be the right place to run from. And they said, we'll support you. And so I went out and campaigned and was lucky enough to get elected in 2015. And then the opportunity came back again 3 years later. The first time I had opposition, second time I didn't. And so I'm concluding my 8-year term on the council. Last year, Mayor Willie, who is to be commended for his service to the community, half century with the fire department plus, and a third of a century in town government, indicated when we had a party for him, celebrate being the longest serving mayor in the history of Easton, that this was going to be the end of his reign. He was going to be done and was not going to run again in 2023. And I started looking around and saying, there's some things I'd like to see done. And I think at this point in time, I'm going to test the water, see what people think. And then I started about a month after that saying, I think I'm going to run for mayor. And so that's really what the genesis of running for mayor was about. Well, the mayor has broad authority. The council, of course, is the legislative body, and the mayor runs the day-to-day operations of the town. All department heads report to the mayor, and the mayor really is the captain of the ship. I look at the hospital situation, and I've been involved going back to 2006 with the medical community on various issues, and am frustrated, very frankly, that we don't have a new regional medical center at this time. When the University of Maryland bought our facility, they made us a promise that they were going to build us a new regional medical center. But first, they had to take care of their circumstances in Dorchester County and Cambridge and get that squared away, which they've done. But the last piece in the puzzle is getting this new regional hospital. And I thought it was great that Governor Hogan suggested that $100 million be put into the budget to get started. But that was only a suggestion because he was going out and Governor Moore was coming in. And it was up to Governor Moore and his staff to determine what their budget would be. And it wasn't put into the proposed new budget. And so started talking to our legislators and other people who are knowledgeable. In fact, I met last week with Ken Kozel to talk through some issues and concerns of mine, and said, how do we get money into a supplemental budget? Found out that maybe $10 million was going to be put into a supplemental budget. And so that prompted me to call Ken Kozel and say, Ken, what do we really need at this time to get this rolling? And he said, well, we need a commitment from the community. We need some money from the state. And I asked about the foundation because we have a substantial amount of money in the foundation. And he said, some of it's restricted, some of it's unrestricted. So there is some money there. But looking for the town and the county to step up and try to raise $50 million in the 5-county region. And that made a lot of sense. My concern is that as a council member from the town of Easton, I haven't heard any discussions about these kinds of things from the mayor's office. Mayor meets with Ken Kozel, as does the county. Chuck Callahan, before that, it was Corey Pack. And I know sitting at county council meetings, Corey Pack has talked about how he had told the other council members about the meetings. Well, as council members, mayor has never come back to us and told us about the meetings. I'm big into two things. Number one is sharing information, and number two is transparency and keeping people involved. Having, for 38 years, had to report to boards of directors, I learned very quickly, do not bring them bad news if you haven't prepared them. And make sure that, if the budget's good, the meeting's good. But if the finances aren't good, the meeting's not going to be a lot of fun. And there are things with the town that I think we can do better. As a town council member, I don't get my packet of materials for a Monday meeting until Friday. That really doesn't give me enough time to dig in and get questions answered from staff and really ask for information that I think is important for the public to know about. The other thing is we do not get a P&L statement. And every board I've ever been on gets a P&L statement. All we get are the bills. So I think structurally, there's some things that we could do a much better job of sharing between the council and the mayor's office. We need to have more open discussions, more dialogue. We need to prepare the council better for votes and make sure that they really know what's going on. Well, first of all, I always tell people we have a green belt, self-imposed, on the town of Easton. Most people don't know where that is or what that is. And we decided a long time ago we'd only grow so far. But I think we can tweak our development process. I think we should, as a town, we should say, this is where we want these kinds of things, as opposed to a developer coming in and saying, I'm thinking of buying this land and this is what I want to do. Before we even get to the Planning Commission, we need to be, when a project is brought before us, we need to be talking with the county and see how it impacts them. We need to talk to the school district. If it's on a state highway, we need to talk to state highway. I just feel as though the communication is not going back and forth. And I've been going for the last 2 years to as many town planning commission meetings, historic district commission meetings, park board meetings, you name it, to try to get a sense of how they operate and what we could do better. You talk about how do you master plan your community? We don't have a master plan for parks. We're acquiring parks, but we don't have a master plan. We don't have a master plan for housing, for workforce housing. Now, there's all kinds of definitions. We're talking about the people who serve us in this community, who work for our county and our town, who work in our school districts, who are police officers and work in the fire department or volunteer for the fire department or an EMS. We don't have a real good strategic plan. And one of the things that we don't do is the mayor and council don't sit down with our executives in each of the departments and do a strategic plan each year. I'm used to doing that with our boards of directors so that you have a game plan, you know where you're going. So a lot of times we're reacting to things that are happening around us. I think we should be much more proactive, and we, working with our citizens, should say this is appropriate in our community and this is not appropriate, and then manage the development. I'm very concerned about the Oxford corridor. I don't want to see that become a mess. I don't want to see unlimited traffic. And so, we've got some projects that are coming before us, and I have some ideas and thoughts on those. And when the time's appropriate, when it comes before us, I'll make what I think is an appropriate statement on those issues. First of all, I've lived in different places and gotten to see what things work and what doesn't work. And so I have a little broader view. Secondly, I've been very involved in the legislative process. South Dakota, I was the head of the Assessors Association. We got rid of what we called the personal property tax, which was a liar's tax. And that was one of my goals when I went in there. I've lobbied legislatures. I was on the State Chamber Legislative Committee for 17 years. And I think the mayor should be the #1 lobbyist for the town of Easton. Should be in Annapolis, should be working behind the scenes with the governor's office. I also think, besides our senator and our 2 delegates, we need to have somebody lobbying for us all the time. We need to be looking at as many grants as possible for this community. I think we just need to look forward and we need to move our community forward. And the other thing we need to do is we really need to make people feel that they've been included in our community. And I've talked about this before. Reverend Davis and I have had many discussions about this. There are a lot of people here who felt the sting of segregation. And it's still very, very close in their memory. And I see that when I go to different events. And we need to figure out a way to bring the minority communities in, to make them feel welcome, to make them feel they want to come downtown, that there's something for them to do. I sit on the Chesapeake Multicultural Resource Board. And so, I'm getting a sense of what our newest immigrants to the community are going through, and the work that's being done to help them become part of the community. And having been on a number of different boards over the years, I think I have a really good view of what's going on in the community and who the people are to gather when we have a problem and work together. Things, I'm for limited growth. I think there's a place for some development, but I don't want to see us become like Long Island became, or Glen Burnie, or any other place like that. And I, just because I work for the Chamber of Commerce didn't mean that I wanted to see our community grow in such a manner that none of us want to live here anymore. We all came here for a reason, because of the quality of life. And I think we've got to work very hard to preserve that quality of life. The other thing I didn't mention is I'm on the Talbot Historical Society board, and I'll become the president May 1st. So I'm learning more and more about the historical perspective of our community, and really respect those individuals who have been here, who want to protect it. It's important to keep our history alive.